Good.
My colleague Nastya Ignatova, she works in urban lab of UN Habitat program. And actually, we've been working previously with her on urban planning projects, and currently Nastya is involved in sharing resilience worldwide, because UN Habitat actually works with multiple countries, and we are very interested in the agenda they are setting for sustainable development and resiliency. And that's why it's really unique opportunity to have Anastasia here today, because we can ask a bunch of questions related to these policies impacting all the humanity, actually. So the context of this talk is nature-based solutions, which we just started discussing in the channel. And Anastasia, she works for the Horog in Tajikistan, where United Nations imply the resilience approach. And we're going to be discussing this project as well as other projects Anastasia is involved in, and her experience of moderating the session related to nature-based solutions in on the assembly of UN Habitat. So now I would like to ask you about the role of UN Habitat in enforcing resilience, about your experience with Tajikistan, and about the assembly as well.
Thank you very much, Oksana. Thank you. Hi, everyone from Istanbul. I hope you can hear me all right. It's been a couple of long hours flight. But yes, we had a very pleasant UN Habitat assembly. And for those who doesn't know myself, but I know that I see some people here, well, I know some familiar faces. So it's been nearly 7 years that I work with UN Habitat. It's the department under the United Nations that is focused on promotion of sustainable urbanization and working with government, local governments, mostly communities around the world. And I work in UN Habitat Urban Lab. So it's a small department within UN Habitat. Well, not really small, it's kind of, we are 15 people, international experts. And what we do is we integrate all the knowledge within the United Nations that are dealing with urbanization issues, and we try to practically apply them in different contexts. So when we talk about resiliency, I think we have a bunch of projects where we have some practical experience. As for example, I was based for 9 months in Tajikistan running a project in Horog. So it's a small town in the Pamiri Mountains, which is very affected by climate change. And we did multiple initiatives that really foster the urban resilience and hazard mitigation of the city. So I will tell you about that a bit later. And 2 weeks ago, I attended the UN Habitat Assembly in Nairobi. It's also a big event, but it was the second one. The first one was 2 years ago, and it's always very difficult to actually grasp some practicalities and practical advice within these big events. So if you have any precise questions, or if you want to get to know something, just ask a question, anything, absolutely anything. I'll be happy to respond, because if there is a task for me just to summarize the key messages, it's not a job, because it's the problem of the big events like that.
Right. Well, what about the focus on the local governments? Because we know that the policies should be general for all, because the climate, we share the same planet, we share the same water everywhere, and they don't know administrative boundaries. But the level of implementation is local. So how United Nations works with, how UN Habitat works with the local governments, and how the organization helps them get in touch and actually imply the resiliency policies, considering that a lot of developing countries normally don't have the resources for implementing these solutions.
Yes. Well, that's a very big problem, actually. The mandate of all actually United Nations agencies that we should work only with the local and national governments, that we cannot really work with partner agencies. But sometimes we work with the big banks, or sometimes we work with different funds or trust funds. So there are some financing mechanisms for the cities that can ensure that there is a separate budget line that is going to resiliency or to nature-based solutions. So basically, if I'm a donor and I come to the specific context, I can say that I donate you, or for example, I invest in your city this amount of money, but this amount of money should be channeled specifically to a specific sector. And it can be also nature-based solutions. But it's up to me as a donor to choose the field I would like to invest. And that's a bit of a challenge, because nature-based solutions, they are not really like bankable projects, most or for example anything related to green or resilient policies, sometimes it's not really bankable as well. So that's why there are some issues with investing mechanism or sustainability of investment, that for example a lot of partners like to invest in big pieces of infrastructure, and a lot of costs are going to the maintenance of this infrastructure later on. So there was also an interesting report which was launched by UNEP in 2022, that all around the world there is less than a half investments that are needed to minimize the impact of climate change around the world. So it's like less than a half of investments are targeting any action that is related somehow to climate change. So it's a big issue. So how do we
kind of separate these investments from the rest of investments, because climate change is such a broad, field?
Yeah.
So it's, when you're saying that they are not bankable, you mean that it's not possible to calculate the return on investment?
Yes, exactly. So it's very difficult to understand what revenues such solutions might bring.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and sometimes it seems like not very profitable to invest in that. And but of course there are solutions for that, and that was also the question for the panelists. And we had a very nice session with. I took my notes with me with Eleni Mirivili. She's the Chief Heat Officer of Athens. And she was the first who actually established the resilience office in Athens. So basically, her story is great because she basically created a position for herself, and she started to do the city urban resilience program in Athens. The woman, and she took this courage to say that, okay, let's minimize the impact of urban heat island effect, and let's do something. So. And what she was saying, that it's important at least to create an appropriate title before even starting a project. Like that people can familiarize themselves that there is such an issue, that there is such a term, sustainability, resilience, that there is a person responsible for that, etc. So why am I saying that? That all of the nature-based solutions or any solutions related to minimizing the impact of climate change, we can make them bankable if we can look for synergies with other work streams and other sectors. For example, nature-based solutions related to infrastructure can come together with the renewal of the road system, for example.
Right.
This kind of things. And having a specific person that is assigned for the search of these synergies, it's also extremely important, apparently.
So that's the part of her role as a resilience officer for the Athens.
Yes, yes, looking for these synergies and trying to make this project bankable, because that will be an additional plus for the partners who come and invest.
Right.
So it comes in the project proposals, in the program proposals. That was the part of her job. That was quite interesting perspective.
Yeah. So, but the so UN Habitat is the platform. So technically, it's like the platform for all of these local governments to meet and exchange the experience. Or what might be other ways that UN Habitat supports the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes. Well, UN Habitat plays multiple roles. When it's the time of the event, such as an assembly, of course, we're the platform where all the stakeholders come and discuss and share best practices, and also where local governments can meet as well potential donors and banks and partners, and where can they have different agreements for future projects. And ООН Habitat can as well can provide technical expertise for the local.
Yeah, I guess it's very important because normally, like, even if the local government would be able to find the implementation funds, it's really hard to find resources for actually providing the research so that these solutions would be research based.
Yeah, it's impossible, especially for some for the global south. Let's say for this, we never really like this division: global north, global south. But we mostly work with the global south. As some contexts, they really don't even have planning expertise.
Yeah.
So usually, in this case, we are hired. For the partner to deliver specific outcomes for the context, and we need also to train the local capacity.
Okay.
So
you're working also with the local potential planners or emerging leaders in this field, so that they would know like what approaches exist and how can they.
Exactly. Yeah. It was specifically also very interesting experience in Tajikistan, because Tajikistan, especially for some listeners in this group, has inherited this post-Soviet hierarchical planning system.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult because it's very solid, and it's very difficult to integrate any new component, for example, or like there is this culture of general plans where you plan according to the functional zoning, and you cannot do anything after 30 years with that. So, and it was very interesting experience because we actually had a person who was seconded in Tajikistan to work together with the national planning authorities, coming every day to their office and trying to just talk about nature-based solutions included as well, about different planning issues. And after they started to borrow the language of modern planning, and it actually gave some impact, because now they're trying to completely change the legislative system.
Oh, wow.
So they try to amend the term of general plan and to integrate more master planning approach. So, and it is done by the people who've been working there for 40, 50 years. So these planners really bought the idea, and they're really innovative. So it was absolutely fantastic.
That's really, I am very surprised to hear that, because I know how normally slow the change in big bureaucracies and big established structures go. And I still, like in my practice back in Russia, I did not hear, other than sustainable development, I did not hear the language of resiliency used in planning at all, which I guess hopefully we will be changing. But it's such a long process, and general planning is still in place. And I know that everybody's moving towards master planning, but I think that the next step would be the resiliency planning as a separate part of master planning, because it's just like focused more on the issues of extreme weather events. So that's, I'm very interested in hearing more about your Tajikistan case, because I know that it was not, so it's related to not like to coastal resilience, but to water resilience, because it has this temperamental character of the river, which actually I know that a lot of southern areas of Russia also have. So there are a lot of implicability in Russia for that as well. So can you explain, like, how do you pursue this process, and what is Urban Lab role in this, like in establishing this process and working with potential local leaders, and then finally how the implementation is going to happen?
Thank you, Oksana. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this project. And it's true that maybe it's not directly related to the shore urbanism, but in fact, we also were proposing the riverbank reinforcement initiative, and also the revitalization of some parts of the riverbanks as well, bringing some economic activities. So we wanted to switch this perception of the river in the city as well, from the channel to a proper river. And we started the project 2 years ago by the Aga Khan Foundation, because the Aga Khan Foundation, they're helping mostly the Ismaili communities around the world. And in Panir, in Tajikistan, where Korog is, it's the biggest concentration of Ismailis living there. So that's how we came, and we started to help these communities, working with local government, we had an agreement. And basically, to explain the process, so Urban Lab usually have the three main steps: is the understanding the city, where we collect the data, we clean the data, we do the analysis, the basic analysis. Then there is the next step is the planning the city, so where we try to define the strategic recommendations, etc. And the third stage is transforming the city, is where we identify specific areas in the city that can bring the maximum impact, and we call it transformative impact. And this is the most important thing. That's how we can translate big ideas into implementable projects that can really bring some changes on the ground, that can then co-benefit broader goals, like in sustainable development goals, where of which no one really talks about nowadays because they're very broad. But in fact, you can really link some impact on the ground to the broader objectives. And we have some tools that we've implemented and piloted. So we developed these investment prioritization mechanism. So, and this tool is supposed to help local governments to select top priority projects for the cities according to the several criteria. So each criteria is based on the spatial analysis, assessment, the future vision, community voices, etc. So this is an automatic mechanism where you just need to fill the data about your project, and then you will see, well, it kind of looks like an Excel sheet. You will see where your project stands. Is it coming to the top, or is it in the middle, or it's very, very unsustainable, like the tunnel, or like anything else in the back. So that was interesting, and it's, if you're interested, we can do a next session about this tool, because it's
sounds like very important and very kind of complex thing, which I guess is going to be interesting to discuss in the view of economy of the resilience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so basically the scoring criteria can be anything, and it can be also the strategy related to the nature-based solutions. The strategy can be related for the hazard mitigation. It really depends what is the priority for the city.
Right.
And so it's like ticking basically the box. If you have a specific investment, if you want to invest in a project and you don't know which project you want to invest, and it's very important for the developing context as well, where you need to attract a lot of external partners to come. It's very useful mechanism, like an assessment sheet and then a scoring criteria, and then you have the list of projects. It's very interesting. So yeah, so basically that's what the lab did. We came and tried to connect strategic visions, finance, and the impact on the ground. And we have some results. Actually, we have 2 bridges are being implemented. The priority
already
bridges.
constructed?
Yes,
Wow.
they've started.
So how was the time span of this project? Because I know that you've been there for over a year, I guess.
Yes, it's been over a year I've been there, but the project is around 2 years. So, well, the second phase of the project is around 2 years. So we started a bit earlier than that, but one part started 2 years ago.
Okay. And it was also like you've done all the steps within this time frame. So, for instance, because I know that collecting data is much more complex than it seems to be. So you're not like in the United States where there's like the census data or other open data portals where you can just download your GIS layers and you have everything to make your geoinformatical assessment. But what about the areas that did not have resources to scan all of their lands and other layers needed for analysis? How do you normally deal with that?
Yeah, it's a 1 million question. Trying to figure out how we do it. Let's say with Tajikistan, with this context, this project, we were very lucky because we're working with the very great partners. They had very great GIS data lab, and they had all the GIS layers we needed. But in some contexts, I mean, it's also sometimes we don't have data at all, and sometimes it's difficult to collect data because For example, you go somewhere to the village and communities, they cannot read the map or they don't understand what you're asking. But there are some techniques. We try to use open street maps or open source data if it's a context that is affected by different humanitarian crises. Then usually humanitarians, the partners that work with these issues, they have good drone imageries. So yeah, sometimes we hire partners who can do these drone footages for us, and then we manually we estimate the building heights according to the shade of the building, this kind of thing. So the width of the roads. So it's kind of a job, but it depends what we can extract technically from the Google image. And then we try. The important step after that is to go to this context, to meet with officials, communities, people, and try to validate the data, try to validate the findings. Sometimes also when we don't have anything, we have this tool that is called Rapid Planning Studio. So it's a 3 days workshop where you basically lock everyone from the city government in a room, and you just have the printed map, like it can be a Google Maps or whatever, very simple with just basic layers as roads, etc. And we ask the local officials that draw me the most important part of your city, draw me the economic core in your city. And if there are many of those, like sometimes they can differ in their opinions, for example, where is the city center even, and they start to debate, and actually it's very interesting type of discussions. So, and then we have this sketch, sometimes kind of like, yeah, exactly, like a battlefield, and then we try to digitize it, and it's already the result somehow.
Okay, yeah, that's very impressive. I guess that it might be even more important in some cases than having the super detailed, I don't know, like LiDAR data or something else. But yeah, that's big another topic, data in urban planning and resiliency planning. Yeah, and I guess we're also going to be discussing it. So the project in Horog, is it kind of finished right now, and then what is going to be the next mission you're involved in with UN Habitat Lab?
We are, let's see, yes, we're finalizing the Horog one in a couple of weeks. And then, well, there are plenty of projects. There are a couple of projects in Azerbaijan on rural development as well. But related to the theme of the shore urbanism initiative, we will have a project as well in Kyrgyzstan, in the city of Narin. It's also a small town that is situated on the river. Forgive me, I have no idea the name of the river and the city and the project. It's the future will tell. We also have the Go Blue actually project, the initiative in Kenya, where there is a initiative to revitalize the coast, and also to bring sustainable economic activities to the coast, and also together with the waste treatment initiatives, because also in the Kenyan coast it has a lot of problems with the waste. So yeah, but I will definitely keep you posted on the projects. Also now it's kind of summer, so it's also a bit of a dead period for some reason.
And I know that there's been the movement towards creating urban lab in Ukraine, which is, I think, really interesting in terms of what is happening right now, and it might be kind of risky. But I think that it's very interesting because it expands the understanding of resilience from just addressing climate risks towards addressing the external stress in general.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Oksana, for mentioning that. It's also a very important project that is about to start. So it will be focused on establishing the urban lab in Kiev. And the objective is quite broad, is to build capacity in Kiev for local planners. And I mean, you know it as well for sure that the local capacity is high. So you don't have, actually, you don't have to do any trainings at all. It's just to navigate a bit and to try to integrate this capital investment planning tool to prioritize investment, the one I've been talking a few minutes ago. So because that is a relatively new thing, the project scoring, and in the context like Ukraine, when there is enormous tranches of investments coming, and it's very important to understand which is the priority one, which for example, reconstruction project is the priority one, where to invest the first to make sure that this money is not lost somewhere, or that it's all on the sustainable track, let's say. It's very important to have this tool. So we want to bring it as well to Ukraine, but the context is very challenging. The stage of the project is challenging. So also, if anyone here in this room have any person from Ukraine, planner, urban designer, just please let me know. It can be very helpful because we are looking also for people with whom to work with as well.
Yeah, I think it's very important to base that on the local resources, on the local talents. But at the same time, that's super challenging to start it right now, when I think people would better save their lives from that, like from the area of conflict. And I personally hope that this will end as soon as possible. But at the same time, does it make sense to start the recovery and reconstruction process if the war still goes on? I think that's very probably this like this move towards creating urban lab there is like with understanding, then okay, it's gonna finish, and then we're gonna start recovery as soon as possible. I hope so, because I also would like to know that people are relatively safe as much as possible.
Yeah.
Do you think, because I kind of switched to the bigger implication of urban lab in the in general, in broader locations. Do you think we can come back to nature-based solutions as well, and just briefly discuss what were the approaches other than the resiliency officer of Athens to nature-based solutions implementation in the cities? Because I've been working on coastal resiliency mostly, and we're currently working with the city of New York in coastal resiliency projects. And there are a lot of important topics also related to what you mentioned, like the sources of funding. Even here, they're still looking for grants and other additional resources to co-funding nature-based, because it's pretty expensive and not easy to calculate the effects. So what were the major topics of the speakers, and also, if possible, just briefly, who were the speakers on the sessions which you moderated?
Yeah, thank you, Oksana. I took the notes which I was using during this session, and actually it was quite successful, because nature-based solutions is something that resonates with people, because everyone understands more or less what does it mean. And so at the session, there was a very interesting person. You can also Google her for those who doesn't know. Yes, Jenny Birch. She's co-director from Penn Institute for Urban Research, the University of Pennsylvania. So she was absolutely fantastic person, and she was talking a lot about how it is important to understand the type of nature-based solutions before starting the project, because it can be related to, as you know very well, to hazard mitigation, to infrastructure, to anything else, to different policies, etc. So it's very important to understand the specificity of it. And after that, you can build a knowledge exchange platform with people who are working in the similar context. So like that, you have kind of
cross-jurisdictional efforts to also to make the symbiosis between different programs, right?
Yes, exactly. But it's very important to determine the topic first very right, to get it very right. Like that, you kind of narrow down as much as possible your field, and then you try to look your partners, like knowledge partners, of course, in the same field. So kind of like shore urbanism initiative. I think she was telling exactly about that. So it was very, very interesting. The same message was also shared by Alice Kaumba. So she was the senior manager from C40s. And I don't know if you're very much familiar with these C40s.
Initiative for local government.
Yeah,
Cities.
yeah, exactly. So basically, yeah. So that's the global platform to that unites cities to share their experiences, and that's very effective in Europe. But they were also expressing the challenge that it's difficult to share these best practices and experiences beyond the C40s partners, like in a more developing context. What was also interesting, that was also shared the message by the head of Nature for Climate branch from UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, by Miri Atala. This lady was also a fantastic speaker. She said that it's very important to understand the maintenance costs for the nature-based solutions. For example, every riverbank revitalization, it can be great, but then you cannot really maintain it. And since the city cannot really drive this process, then it's a pathway to nowhere, so it can cause even a degradation. So any initiative should be very carefully estimated in the long run.
Right.
And it kind of, these messages were pretty much obvious, but it was nice even to talk them through, because like that you can have a bigger picture of that. And for this estimation of the maintenance, it's very important to once it's very obvious message, but it was said, to find a very related expertise, a very right expertise, because
Right. I guess
sometimes yeah,
challenges such a new field yet.
yeah, because it's very limited, the amount of right expertise, especially in nature-based solutions, because there is still a common understanding that it's about planting trees or doing some greeneries.
Yeah.
Which is not. And from that, there is also a challenge that sometimes it's difficult to find synergies between the projects because you don't have an expert. And that was this message was nicely backed up by the person from Athens. Yeah, we talked about her a bit, that she basically decided her expertise and she nominated herself as a leading expert because she knew the process, how to do it. And apparently she achieved a lot in Athens, so they're doing a lot of deep pavement initiatives. So basically removing the part of the pavement, like that you reduce the heat island effect.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the major, because I mean, like for those who've been to Athens, you can feel this hot air everywhere. And I mean, that's great that they were able to find the local, the understanding of the local citizens and communities to implement this initiative. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. What was interesting as well was shared by Kira Intrater. She's also our partner from the Agacan agency for Habitat. So she was picked up a very nice thought that also it's important to have perspective from women, especially when it comes to nature-based solutions, because they can bring absolutely different approach, ideas, and also in some contexts it's also difficult, for example, maybe for us to understand, but in some contexts women have different approach to river. In some contexts we know where the river is, because men sometimes they don't go to the river because they don't need to wash their clothes, or they don't need
Oh, wow.
to,
You mean the kind of tribal communities, the communities with kind of traditional way of living, so they are more like women more familiar of like knowing where the resources are and other like natural facilities, let's say.
Exactly, yes, because especially in many cases in Africa as well, women are the ones who are carrying the amount of water, and they're actually very good observers, because women, since they do that quite frequently, so it's their main duty to keep the household, and like keeping households is always related with water resources. They can actually monitor the level of water in their water sources. either it's a pond or either it's a river. So, and they can be very good knowledge collectors, women as well. So it was very unusual, and it seems so obvious, but then you don't really think of it. And yes, it's true. Actually, women can bring absolutely different perspective on that in some context.
Yeah, I think that's very interestingly goes into collaborative management, because one of the points I've been studying collaborative management on the several cases in the United States where exactly when some crisis happens, the leaders of the project should try to reach out to as many sites as possible, just because each site owns kind of specific part of the knowledge, which another can be not aware of at all. So that's why it's super important to have like this knowledge from women who can measure that, like the levels of water, because you might not be able to find these records anywhere else, like including the, I don't know, like the research communities in the field. So that's really great. I think that's really great way to collaborate with the local knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, indeed. But it was also interesting point was shared that, okay, then when you collect such local knowledge, then how do you translate this knowledge into the data? And further, how do you translate data into evidence? So, and once again, it was kind of a loop of these messages that we were discussing, that the knowledge, the data, evidence, and the right expertise, that you always need to have a right expert.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, for planners, I think it's easy to talk about these things rather than for the specific sectoral person or, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, it's just because urban planners' perspective is like very holistic and we have to be like understanding each of the parts. But at the same time, I think it's very important to know all the details, because sometimes the details, they make most of the sense. So for instance, what you mentioned about the maintenance of nature-based, just on practice, I figured out that that's one of the major barriers against implementation of nature-based, because local governments, they just cannot take this responsibility to invest, you know, communities' money into these big solutions, and then seeing them, I don't know, like being mismanaged because you just didn't have the right, let's call this person gardener, like the right person who can actually understand where and what specific maintenance is needed. Because there's this very common understanding that nature-based, they actually save money on the maintenance because they are like longer term solutions, but it doesn't mean that they are like I don't know, like trees in the forest just grow themselves and take care of themselves. They still need some intervention and you know, some care from the experts.
Yeah, yeah, no, clearly. What was also interesting, that it was kind of very precise discussion, that session. I think because everyone was clicking with this idea that you need you need a very appropriate expert, you need an appropriate team, and everyone started to engage when we were discussing that. I think that also the problem of lack of capacity, I think that resonates with many people. That's why also the session was kind of nice, that I had a chance to monitor, because once again, it was a bit challenging also during this event to have an opportunity to really openly discuss the challenges. Because usually you kind of, you hear that everything is so great, or like there are so many fantastic projects, and you cannot really understand, okay, but I think we have a problem also somewhere. So,
yeah, I think it's valuable to have the open, to safe environment to discuss the existing problems, and that's great that it was possible to make within this assembly framework. And also, I think that's interesting to understand how how other like local governments can imply this like this lessons from the partners, just because a lot of localities, they're so different in terms of environment. So that's one of the, I think, issues with nature-based, that they are so much site-specific that sometimes you just cannot say, oh, okay, we were successful with these mangroves here to protect, I don't know, Indonesians from the floods and storms. But yeah, you cannot imply mangroves, I don't know, in Charleston, because it's yet not the appropriate climate for them there. So that's really interesting to find some patterns that might be used in other places as well.
Yeah. Yes, it's problem. How would you apply one success story to another one? Where it doesn't seem it's difficult. But what, for example, what we do in the lab is that every project we try to convert it into the normative product after. So we try always to document what worked, what didn't work, for example, even when it comes to some details. For example, the photo that I shared with you, like these different flags on a map. So we're trying to do this prioritization exercise. We did the same exercise with stickers. So with stickers, it doesn't work because you have to like
they overlay.
Exactly. They overlay, and then it's difficult, and then it's not that engaging. But when you have a flag, then this kind of everyone, each participant wants to have this flag and to put it in a specific place. He thinks
That's our kind of natural, how to say, like the reflex, like you have this, you know, inner drive to be a winner, to put your flag somewhere and, you know, have your word. That's interesting. I've never used this technique actually.
And that's yeah. So I mean, it's so simple, but it's important to document it. And once you document it in a case study or your experience, then it can become kind of a tip or an advice. For example, that it can work in all the contexts, because in all the contexts, people would prefer to take a flag rather than to paste a sticker on the paper. So yeah, and if also your team and you have as well any like this kind of targeted advice that is specific and tailored to context, that could be fantastic also to get to know, for example, what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
When you, because it's across different fields and work streams. It's conversation with the communities, with the government, collecting the data. How do you clean the data? Because everyone is doing in their own style.
Yeah, that's a big issue, I know. Yeah, we were all working with files created by somebody else, and I know this pain of understanding afterwards how actually, like, which layer is still updated,
Yeah.
which is the source is lost. So yeah, that's a big issue to establish this framework, I guess. And you are kind of, so you establishing this framework, and then you are leaving it to the local experts to kind of take care of it further, right?
Yes, but that's also very difficult, because you cannot really establish the framework and then to leave them the database, because if there is no JS person who can monitor the progress and who can document the shifts within your system, then it doesn't make sense. So we always have this component of capacity building. So within each project, you always have someone you constantly train or work with. So there is also this learning by doing process. So this kind of things we always try to integrate, and then you can kind of hand over all your work. And like that also, it's important to build ownership, like that the local government, they own the product they are working on. So and once they feel that it's actually their product, it's their project, it's this, and they're the main custodians of any development, then it can, that's also the difference between private sector or someone like United Nations or some other international organizations who come and they try to train and to work together rather than just delivering a ready-to-go product.
Yeah.
So, big difference.
I actually think that it's interesting. That's probably one of the kind of post-Soviet remnants in terms of that someone is coming from outside and, you know, developing something and leaving this something, and that's how it's done. So this, you know, kind of disintegration from the process actually creates what we have with a lot of post-Soviet cities. So a lot of discommunication and disconnection from actually what people needed there. just because it never was a part of the collaborative process.
Yeah, it is true. But in fact, when you talk, for example, with this National Planning Authority, so I had a lot of meetings here in Tajikistan, and when you deliver them these messages that you don't have this collaborative process, you don't really collect the data in a participatory manner in the field with the communities, they say that no, but we have this, we do it. Of course, we call it public hearings, so we come and then we present the project and so on. So it's very difficult actually to explain that no, it's not really that. Maybe you can another technique, or maybe you can just talk. So yeah, sometimes it's difficult, but I would say that it's not impossible to explain. And they also understand that, for example, in Tajikistan, that they would need more young planners, and they would like to have these profession, urban planning and design, to be more popularized as well within the country. So yeah, many people understand, but it's also a matter of appropriate language. But again, in UN Habitat, we also have a specific department that is doing only capacity building.
Oh, wow.
They have online platforms, they have different training materials, they have as well professionals who come and teach you. They have specific training components on finance, legislation, planning, design. So there's kind of a training package that is delivered to the local governments. So what we do, it's kind of at the superficial level. But if someone is very keen to be trained, then UN Habitat also provides such a service.
Yeah, that's really great. I think it's one of the most important things, because it never would work without local leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. That was super insightful and interesting and fun. I know that you are on your way to France, I guess, right now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that you found the time for this talk during your long way there, and I actually hope to have another conversation with you later when you're gonna be set up in France, because because that's another interesting project related to water wars in France. So yeah, I really hope to talk to you later. And I don't know. Thank you so much. That was so great.
Thank you, Oksana. It's always fantastic to speak to you, really, because it's just walking through these key messages. We didn't discuss precisely HB solutions, but we again discussed a lot of just nice to walk through. And yeah, let's keep in touch. And also, I've been sharing about your initiative, the shore urbanism initiative, with some colleagues, and also many people will be interested as well to connect and to have
That's
a chat.
great. Thank you so much.
Oh, no,
All right. Then we're looking
for now.
forwards.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking forward to seeing you soon as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.